Good morning. I've had a fun time just kind of doing some videos of some how-tos of some basics that I like to teach, but also that are things that everybody needs to know how to do a little better. And not that I'm perfect, but this is a way I work to get perfect things. I've been doing Edita Sitar's Mystery, and she has had us, in her directions, cut half square triangles and then sew them together. And that has never worked well for me unless I oversize them and then square them down, which is basically what I do when I do the square method, which is just draw a diagonal line on the back of the lighter fabric and then stitch a 1/4 inch on either side. So the measurements for that are very easy. So if you wanted your triangles to finish at 3 inches, which is what I want today, then I cut my squares 4 inches. Technically, they should only have to be 3 7/8 inches. I have rarely gotten a correct, exact half square triangle doing it that way. It just is way too hard to keep that bias straight. And if I'm going to spend that much time, I'll just trim them down when I'm done. And of course, today it's not that many. I think it's 16. It's 4 per little square. So yeah, 16. So I'm going to be doing that. And so what I'm going to do is from my fabrics, I am going to cut 4-inch squares. From each square, you get 2 half square triangles. And I'll show you that in just a minute. I've got my squares, my lighter color, my darker color, 4 inches square. These are going to end up at 3 inches finished. And I'm going to be squaring these down, so I'm not going to worry about that little thread that's there. So now that I've got these, I've layered them up. And another tip, sometimes when we draw on the back, and I'm just using I love a mechanical pencil because the point, the line is so fine, and the line itself, the thickness makes a difference as you're stitching as to where you put your 1/4 inch foot. So I like these fine lines. So again, I cut a 4-inch square for a 3-inch finished half square triangle. If I were going to do a 3.5-inch finished, or I would cut 4.5. If I were doing a 2 3/4 inch finished, I would do a 3 3/4 inch square. So you just add 1 inch to the finished size of what you want for this method. I'm going to layer this up. I'm going to draw a diagonal line now from here to here. When you draw your diagonal line, there's even a tip about this. Start in the middle and go to the out, because if I don't, it can want to wiggle and move away from me. If you go ahead and stack them up right sides together, you're ready to sew. So I'm right sides together. I starched all my fabric because these are going to end up on the bias. And so there we go. I would go ahead and draw lines on all my lights, which I have 8 lights, which will give me 16 half square triangles. I have 4 of each color of my darks, and that will give me 8 of each, equaling 16 total, right? Okay, so now I'm going to go to my machine and I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch on either line, either side of this 1/4 inch line right here. Okay. Good morning, Violet. The name of my machine is Violet because she's purple on one side, on the front side. So I call her Violet. I've shortened my stitch length to a 2.0. I just like to do that. It holds it together well. So I'm placing my presser foot right on the line that I have drawn, my 1/4 inch foot. You could actually go a little scant if you want to, because you're going to be trimming down. Now, ordinarily, I would just add my next one. I'll go ahead and add this next one. And just keep going. And that's assembly line sew. And if I weren't doing this video, I would go ahead and do all 16 at one time, but I won't bore you with that. So now what I do is I take my presser foot, raise it up, and I don't even cut usually. I just turn it backwards and go. Some of you may wonder, why does she have that little piece of fabric right there? Well, that is we call it a leader. Some people call it a security blanket. I just call it a leader and ender, but some people do that with actual blocks, and then you have, you know, something else to work on later if you're doing little strip sets or whatever. But this little piece of fabric does a couple of things. It saves thread because you don't have that long piece of thread at the beginning and the ending. You don't have to trim big threads. So now I'm just cutting apart on this drawn line while I talk about leaders and enders. And then come around here to watch me press them. So that leader and ender saves thread, but it also can help if your machine has a tendency to put the points down inside. You know what I'm talking about, to eat up your points and make you nuts. Okay, the first thing I did when I pressed is just to press that kind of bonds my thread to my fabric. Now I'm going to lift this up and gently press over to the dark side. These I'm going to press to the dark side. The blue ones, according to Edita's directions, I'm going to press to the light side. We typically don't do that. We typically do our Darth Vader pressing. Press to the dark side. But in this case, we are not going to do that. Another tip, if you have a lot of these half square triangles to do, is as you're pressing them, because you see they kind of, because it's on that bias, you've got a little play there. But I'm going to press it good, and then I'm going to press the next one, lay it right up next to it, and that seam right there gives this seam a little stability. Now you don't want to do it for more than, say, 4 at a time, because it gets stacked up there and your seam isn't pressed as nicely. So now I've got 4 out of 2 squares. I've got 4 half square triangles. Now I'm going to square them down. My cameraman over here. Thank you, cameraman. It's my hunky hubby. Okay, I am left-handed. So I start with my low numbers and my diagonal line in the upper left-hand corner. If you were right-handed, you would do it this way, with your low numbers up in the right-hand corner and go this way. Okay, so now this square needs to be at 3.5 inches to be perfectly perfect. The Mary Poppins, practically perfect in every way. So because I gave myself that extra little 1/8 inch of when I cut it at 4 inches instead of 3 7/8, I have these little trims. Trust me, that does matter. I'm lining my diagonal line on my square ruler. You can use any square ruler. You can actually use a rectangular ruler, although it's a little harder. This makes it so nice. And because I was talking, I'm going to have to go back and do that other side again. But now, see, I did not get that end off over here. So I have to go back in and trim that off. Make your hand as if it were a camera holder tripod, although it's 5 fingers. Make it like that, and your ruler is less likely to shift. Now, this is perfectly perfect at 3.5. This one's getting ready to be. Up and across. Okay, so see, now that point is actually very perfect. I'm going to line that perfectly perfect point up on the point of this ruler at 3.5 inches and hold it in place with my tripod fingers. also, if you put one finger on the other side of the ruler, like my thumb is over here, you can also stabilize, but it also keeps you, I really, unless I had huge hands, there was no way I was going to cut my finger. So there we go. I can continue trimming these up, and I will have perfect half square, 3.5 inch right now, finish at 3 inches, half square triangles. So this is the draw the diagonal line method, and so on either side.